Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, May Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing my June TBR. Now, I'm very excited for this TBR because I'm going to be participating in the Ghibli readathon that was put together by several different booktubers. The person that I saw the video for is Rachel from Let Me in the Library, but she's one of many different hosts that are participating or the hosts for this readathon. So I'll go ahead and link Rachel's video down below, and she has links to all the other hosts. And I'll also include the link to the Google Doc with all of the prompts that they've created for this readathon. There's also a few extra bonus prompts you can do for the readathon. One of them is to watch a Ghibli movie, which no problem, I'll do that. I know they're going to be streaming them throughout the month as well, the hosts are, so check that box. The next one is you could cosplay as one of the characters. I don't tend to do that, so I probably won't be fulfilling this one. But the third one is to cook food from a Ghibli movie. Now, if you don't know, the food in Ghibli movies is notoriously delicious looking. Like, it makes you salivate when you're watching the movies. And it actually has a name in Japan called Ghibli Meshi because it's well known that this is a phenomenon. So I thought it'd be pretty fun if I can convince my husband, who's a Japanese chef, if I can convince him to make a video teaching people how to make a particular Ghibli food and put that on my channel. So I don't know if I can convince him to do that. He's not a huge fan of being behind the camera, but I think that that would be so fun to post. Maybe I can work something out with him where maybe he tells me how to do it and then I can be on camera. We'll see. But that's my dream for that prompt, is if I can make a video of how to make one of the meals from a Ghibli movie. Look, listen, I love Ghibli. I have loved Studio Ghibli for such a long time. You've probably noticed I have I've had this behind me for quite some time. It's a little Princess Mononoke, what's the word? I guess trinket? Not a trinket, what would you call this? I don't know, I'm blanking on the word. I'm gonna go with trinket. Behind me, if you look in the little hole, we have another little kodama who's hanging out inside. Princess Mononoke is my favorite Ghibli film, but if you go around my house, you'll see that I have little bits of Ghibli kind of scattered everywhere. My keychain is Totoro. Actually today, I decided in the spirit of the video, I would wear my Calcifer earrings. I don't know if you can see. From Howls Moving Castle, this is Calcifer. So I have little tidbits of Ghibli kind of scattered throughout my life because they just make me happy when I see them. So of course, when I saw there was a Ghibli readathon, I was like, this is calling my name. This is where I'm meant to be. So I decided to participate. So the way they've set it up is that each host is representing a different movie. So, you can follow the same movie as your host. They also have a quiz you can take to see which movie matches you. But out of the movies that they are including in the prompts, my favorite one is Spirited Away. So I decided to follow the prompts from Spirited Away, as well as try to get a bingo on the bingo board. Now, this is also along with all of the other, placeholder things that I have on my TBR every month. So we're biting off a lot this month. Let's hope we can chew it. The first 3 books are going to be for the Spirited Away prompts. So the first one is to get a recommendation from someone that you trust. Now for this one, it's someone that I trust that has really similar taste to me, right? And the first person who popped in my head immediately was Lena from Sufficiently Advanced Lena. Every time she talks about books, whether it's a book I've never heard of or a book that I also love, we just have really similar feelings about books, and the books we tend to pick up and be drawn to are also really similar. So I asked Lena and said, hey, can you give me a recommendation? And she gave me The Wolf of Oranguro. And my prediction was right on point. This book has been on my TBR for months now. I've been wanting to get to it. Other people that I really trust have recently had rave reviews for it. And it's just been something that's been on my radar, but I haven't had it, bumped to the very top of my TBR. But here it is. So I know this is available from my library, so I will be reading that this month. Don't know too much about it except for following a main character who's a queen, and she's known as the Bitch Queen for having supposedly exiled her husband and kind of taken over. And we just follow her. I also know that she's older, and I believe she's a mother, and I love reading about older women who are like mothers in fantasy because it's not something you see very commonly, and I just really enjoy having the protagonist be of that demographic, so that's something else that's really pulling me towards these books. This next one is Childhood Love. So this is a book that you loved when you were a child. And this is actually perfect timing for this prompt because if you've watched my recent wrap-ups or my most recent vlog, I talk about this series called Dealing with Dragons that I loved when I was a child. And I decided to reread it this past month, or the past 2 months. I loved the first 2 books in this series. The third one, I'll talk about it in my wrap-up. That's going to be on my channel soon, but was not my favorite. But there's one more in this series, and I'm gonna fulfill this prompt by reading the 4th book in this series. I'm really hoping that this book brings it home to the amazingness of the first 2 books. We'll see. I have high hopes though, so I'm excited to get to this one. The first book in this series follows a princess named Cimarine, and she is kind of not your typical princess. She does not want to do princessly things, and she kind of gets sick of being told that she should be doing that. So she decides the only natural option is to run away. So this is a middle grade. It's very funny, very unique. It twists a lot of fantasy tropes on their head. So Cimarine runs away and she volunteers herself to be kidnapped by dragons. She says, hey, I would really appreciate if one of you would kidnap me right now. Because it's pretty common that once you're kidnapped by a dragon, you don't have to do your princessly duties because you've been kidnapped. So she decides to do that, and then we follow like the adventures along the way. Like I said, the author flips a lot of fairy tale tropes on their head. There's a lot of really subtle humor. It's just really enjoyable. The third prompt for Spirited Away is binge read. You know, to read a book in one sitting, hopefully, maybe 1 or 2. And for this one, I'm going to give myself 2 options depending on my feeling. The first one is going to be Shadow Kiss, the 3rd book in the Vampire Academy series, which I discovered on my channel through my Retro Reads challenge. I love this series. It pleasantly surprised me. It's that just really good, high-quality vampire literature from like early to mid-2000s. I'm pretty sure it's when it's released anyway. I really enjoy it. So I blow through these books. They're pretty easy to read. They're quick. So I think I could read this in one sitting. Or I would like to read Spy Family. This is a manga that I started this past month. And my husband has been telling me for like half a year now, because he read it. He's like, you're gonna love this. This is exactly what you love. So you need to read this. And it's taken me a long time, but I finally picked it up and I am loving it. It is so funny. Basically, we follow our main character and he is a very accomplished spy. He's like the best spy for his country. And they tell him that his next mission requires a family as part of his disguise. So he has to cobble together a family in about a week. So he ends up adopting a random girl who, unbeknownst to him, can read minds. He also ends up getting a wife, and I believe, she hasn't entered the story yet where I am, but I believe she's an assassin. And so we have a spy, an assassin, a little girl, and there's also a dog, but I don't remember what's special about the dog. Like I said, I'm still in the beginning of this series, but they also get a dog who has something unique about him. And it's like, so far, the comedy is chef's kiss. It's amazing. So I'm loving this, and I think I can blow through a couple volumes of this because I'm reading it in English. Usually I read my manga in Japanese, but for this one I decided to go with the English version, so I could definitely binge this in one sitting. Now for the bingo board prompts, I decided to go straight down through the middle, utilizing the free space. So the first one in the middle column that you'll see in the picture that I put on the screen is At Long Last, TBR. Now this doesn't have any more explanation to it, so I'm assuming this is a book that's been on your TBR for a really long time. And for this one, I'm going to give myself, again, 2 options. The first book is going to be The Shadow of What Was Lost. This has been on my TBR for like basically since I saw this cover and someone talking about it, which is a couple of years ago now. This seems extremely up my alley, very classic epic fantasy, like a travel story. I don't know much about it, but all I know is like the back says for fans of like Brandon Sanderson, also Wheel of Time readers, which, you know, I haven't read the Wheel of Time, but I do like that kind of epic fantasy. I love Lord of the Rings. So if this has that kind of epic scale to it and kind of classic feel, I think I'm really gonna dig it. So I do really want to read this. It's a chunker, and I would like to read this physically, so not via audiobook. So we'll see if I get to this one. Or my second option is Priory of the Orange Tree. Now, I bought this right when it came out. I didn't know anything about it except that the cover was beautiful, there were dragons, and there were gays. I was sold on it. So since then I have learned a little bit more about it. I know that it's about two warring nations, one believing that dragons are like deities and one believing that they are bringers of evil. I did start reading this book. As you can see, I have some tabs in the beginning here. So I did start reading this, but I wasn't in the mood for a long epic fantasy at the time that I started this, and I didn't want the book to suffer because of the reading mood I was in. But now, as you can see from, you know, the Shadow of What Was Lost and everything, I'm feeling in the mood for a chunky fantasy. So you know, this is chunky, but I would really like to jump back into this. So this is my other option for At Long Last TBR. This next one in the list on the bingo board is a book with a colorful cover. Now look, if you look at my shelves behind me, you can see there's a theme, usually dark, not so much color. So I'm working with what I've got, and I think I found one that satisfies this for me, and that is Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward. Now I know it's not like bright colors, but that wasn't the requirement. It just needed to be colorful. And I would say there's a lot of colors going on here, you know? It pops. So I'm gonna say this counts. This is a book that I had on my tentative TBR last month that I did not get to. This is another chunker of a fantasy that I bought on a whim when I was buying Black Coast because the cover pulled me in, and I remembered like other people talking about loving this when it first came out. So I really wanted to give it a shot. So I have this now on my shelves. You'll also know if you've been around my channel that I'm trying to read through the physical books that I have. So I wanted to, you know, kill two birds with one stone with this prompt by going with this book for the colorful cover and for my physical books. I don't know anything about this. I told you I bought it on a whim. It truly was on a whim and based on like some whispers I had heard when it first came out. So I hope I love it. The next spot on the bingo board is a free space because we love ourselves and we give ourselves some slack on this channel. So we're gonna go ahead and check that box off. And then after that, we have a book to do with the ocean. So for this one, I'm going to do The Deep by Nick Cutter. So I actually DNF'd the other book that I read by Nick Cutter, which was The Troop. Both of these books are horror novels, but with very different bases. So for The Troop, it was kind of a Lord of the Flies kind of feel to it, where it was a young troop of boys who were stranded on an island, and a sickness gets onto the island with them, and disgusting body horror and things ensue. Now, I talked about this in my most recent wrap-up, so if you want more details, you can look there. Maybe not my most recent, maybe 2 ago. I'll link it above and down below where I talk about it, but I ended up DNFing it because there were some gratuitous animal torture scenes that it's a trigger for me. I couldn't handle it, so it wasn't the fault of the book. And I really liked Nick Cutter's writing. I also have this obsession with reading about the ocean. I'm afraid of it, but I love reading about it. We know this on my channel by now. So I wanted to combine those two things with The Deep. It's another horror novel by Nick Cutter where he talks about the horrors of the deep. I don't really know the details of it, but I'm interested. I really did enjoy Nick Cutter's writing. He's very good at what he does and making you visualize what's happening. So I have high hopes for this book, that it'll make me feel all squirmy, but in a good way. And the last prompt from this bingo card is a book with a sibling relationship. Now for this one, I'm also going to try to kill two birds with one stone, because I also have this thing on my channel where I have my anticipated releases for each month, and I try to read them if possible, if I can get my hands on them. And one of them this month is the Jasmine Throne. I've seen a lot of buzz for this book recently, especially people getting arcs, and that's making it even more anticipated for me, honestly. So this book matches the prompt from the bingo board, because the synopsis says that one of our main characters, her brother, is a tyrannical leader and he locks her away, and then through joining forces with another woman who is hiding her true nature, I'm imagining it's some kind of magical nature she wants to keep hidden. They end up joining forces and trying to take down the brother. So this definitely has a sibling relationship, albeit not a good one. But I am definitely excited to get to this book. Moving on from the Ghibli readathon, there's some more books that I'd like to get to. The next one is the other anticipated read from this month, and that is The Maidens. This is a thriller book by the same person who wrote The Silent Patient, and I loved The Silent Patient. The end of that book blew my mind. I loved the journey so much. It was so good. So when this author said that he would be releasing another book, I knew I was going to be interested. I did read the synopsis of this book, but I don't remember all the details. But what I do remember is that it's got this dark academia feel where there's this like small group called the Maidens of girls who are obsessed with Greek mythology, I think, and one of them turns up dead. And our main character is positive that it's one of the teachers at the school, but he is beloved by everyone, and she can't seem to get anything to stick to him. But it becomes an obsession for her, and she's determined to prove that this man is the murderer. And along this process, I think other people end up showing up dead. So I don't need to know much more than that. I do expect the ending of this to have a nice twist to it, for it to blow my mind like The Silent Patient, so I am really excited to get to this one too. The next kind of placeholder that I have on my TBR every month is a book that helps educate me about the situation of AAPI individuals in America. I explained in my previous TBR why I introduced this slot into my TBRs going forward, but just a brief summary is there are two main reasons. One of those reasons being the current situation for the AAPI community in America, with the hatred going or coming their way because of COVID and a lot of other factors. So obviously that climate is one reason, but the other big reason is that my husband and I plan to move to the States in the next couple years, and I realized that in order to be the best partner for him, I'm going to need to make sure I am more educated on the climate and the environment in the States for an Asian person, because my husband is obviously Japanese, and also there's a language barrier for him. So I'm going to have to navigate certain situations in the States, and I want to make sure that I'm in the best possible situation to do that. So for this month, I'm reading Only What We Could Carry. This is an anthology that captures the experience of Japanese Americans when they were forced into internment camps after the attack on Pearl Harbor. This anthology includes pictures. I think it also said letters, essays, that just kind of capture the whole experience. I think it's really important for me, as someone who will probably be raising a half Japanese family, in the States, to understand the climate at the time, what those people went through, and be able to internalize that history, because as people say, if you don't know history, you're bound to repeat it. The next book that I would like to read is kind of a continuation from my middle grade love from last month. So when my wrap-up goes up, you'll see I read tons of middle grade last month. I've just been in the mood for it. It's hitting the spot. I don't know where this came from, but I'm owning it. So as a continuation from that, I would like to read Bayou Magic. I've heard some really good things about this book from Deidre over on Shade Tree Reads, and I had kind of had my eye on this book for a while. I think I first heard of it over on Thistle in Reverse. I think they mentioned it over on their channel, and I was kind of pulled in by the what's it called? The cover. That's not a very hard word. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. So I was intrigued by the cover, but I decided to not read it until I was in the mood for middle grade, because that's not typically what I pick up. But now that I'm in the mood, it's perfect, so I plan to pick this up soon. This book is about a young girl who goes to visit her grandmother, and while she's there, she kind of learns about the roots of where she's from and the magic that comes with that. There was something else in the blurb about a mermaid that only she can see, so I don't really know how that ties into, you know, the other magical elements of this book, but it just seems like a whimsical adventure about figuring out who you are, which I have just been loving stories like that. I also did notice when I looked this up on Goodreads that this was the third in a series, but according to the reviews, I haven't seen anyone say that you have to read them in order. Like, they seem like they're standalones about women from different generations who kind of go through the same story of finding their roots in the magic, but in different settings. So I don't think you have to read the other ones first. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read these and you think I should. But from what I've seen, a lot of people seem to be reading this as a standalone and loving it. All right, we've got two more books. One of them I am super excited for, and that is Assassin's Apprentice. I have been wanting to read Robin Hobb for so long now, but I just haven't made room in my TBR for starting her series, because she's one of those authors who's been writing for so long that she has tons of books under her belt, which, if you love her books, which I'm assuming I will, or I plan to, that's great because you have so much of the world to delve into and enjoy. But also it can be kind of daunting to start, because you're like, okay, once I start this first book, I want to make sure that I can continue it, that there's space in my TBR to continue it. But I've decided that the second half of this year, I want to allow myself that room. So I'm going to be starting with Assassin's Apprentice. This book, kind of like The Shadow of What Was Lost, I've heard also has like that traditional fantasy feel to it, which I just feel in the mood for right now. I really do. I want more of a traditional fantasy. So I think this is a perfect time to finally pick this up. I believe that we follow a main character named Fitz, and he becomes the apprentice to an assassin, I believe. What I've heard is a lot of this first book is character development and character growth, which I love. You know, I'm a character-based reader, so I really think I'm going to enjoy this one. Plus, I know there are animal companions in these books, and I haven't read... Well, that's a lie. I did just read Black Coast, and there's kind of animal companions in there too. I'll splurge about that in my wrap-up coming soon. But I love me some animal companions. And besides the Black Coast, I haven't read one with animal companions in a long time, a book with those. So super excited to pick this book up. I think this might be one of the first books I pick up as soon as the month starts. And finally, we are at the last book, and that is my Retro Reads challenge. So you'll notice behind me, I did change my cup to this beautiful ceramic jar. I made a Moscow Mule the other day, and I needed my cup. For those of you who don't know, I have a reoccurring segment called Retro Reads Challenge on my channel, where I pick a book from this jar that is over 5 years old. Some of these I'm interested in reading, some of them I'm not, but I put them in there to have me read outside of my comfort zone every once in a while. I found some really good books through this challenge. I found some books that I was not a fan of at all through this challenge. So it's been pretty fun thus far. So let's see what I'm going to read this month. All right. Looks like this month I am reading Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. Okay, this one I have literally no feelings about. I've never read anything by Laini Taylor before. I've heard that her writing is very purple prose, very beautiful, so that could be nice to read. I don't know anything about Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I know there was recently a re-release of covers, special edition covers that came out, so I did see it kind of floating around more than usual, but I haven't heard people talk about it, so I really don't know what this is about at all. I've just never really had any desire to read it personally, but I have no reason for that. So we'll see if my instincts were correct or if I'm gonna end up loving this. concludes my Ghibli readathon and etc. TBR for June. It's June already. Let me know in the comments down below if you're also participating in the Ghibli readathon. If so, what movie prompts are you following? Are you doing something on the bingo board? What's your favorite Ghibli movie? Like, let's spread the Ghibli love. Also, if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. It really helps me with the algorithm, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Ja ne!